Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here today. Absolutely delighted that you could. We are in, myself and Keren are in Tel Aviv and Dublin, respectively. I'm very excited that you're here today. If you're watching on playback, enjoy. Of course, particularly if you're in the US. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody how much I'm enjoying the Paralympics currently. It's incredible feats of athleticism and devotion to the cause. It's just I find it stunning. It's been a month or more of incredible summer sport, and I'm sure that everybody agrees. So to celebrate that, we are and to celebrate the Tokyo 2020 Paralympic Games, absolutely delighted to welcome today to Google an Israeli legend, Keren Leibovitch. She's a Paralympic, well, you can read this, but I'll read it because it's so impressive. Paralympic gold medalist, three-time world champion, 3 times, a holder of 3 world records, and a 7-time Paralympic medal winner. And maybe even more impressively, a super mom with 4 kids. It's an absolute pleasure. Keren, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Wow, what a moment. I mean, that actually gives me goosebumps, and I wasn't even there. So, Keren, you're extremely welcome. Thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
So I thought I'd just start maybe just like I've given you a short introduction, but you'll probably do a much better job than me. So do you mind maybe just for everybody here at Google, maybe a little bit about you and your life story?
Well, I was born able-bodied. When I was 19, I was injured in an accident during my army service. I had a back injury that left me partially paralyzed. At the beginning of the injury, I could jump with crutches for short distances and use the wheelchair for longer ones. 15 years ago, 16 years ago, I had to have shoulder surgery. It was after Sydney, after Athens. I had to undergo shoulder surgery due to repeating dislocation of the shoulders. It's a terrible surgery, very painful, and I left the hospital with my right arm paralyzed due to the surgery. So it left me in a wheelchair. Nowadays, I walk again using crutches via method I developed based on Pilates, which I'll be happy to talk about a little later. After I was injured, I was hospitalized for almost 3 years. And it's a very long time to be in the hospital for 3 years. And I remember after I left the hospital, I felt like, okay, nothing changed. I can go on, I can go back to my regular life, but a lot changed. And I couldn't go back to my regular life. And being angry, I started swimming. I was always a very athletic child. I used to swim. I used to ride bike. I used to practice judo and play tennis and run. But after I was injured, the only place I could be myself in was in the water, because running, I'm proud of myself for walking again. I tried wheelchair tennis and wheelchair basketball, but the only place in which I felt like myself was in the water. So I started swimming, and I would swim like 2-3 Ks every day. And one day, one of the swimmers in the Paralympic Israeli team saw me, and he said, "You swim nicely. Why won't you join us to practice?" So I came and joined them for the first practice, and my coach saw me, and I guess he saw some potential, and we started practicing. And 2 days into my swimming career, I came to my 4 years ahead of Sydney. I came to my coach and I told him, well, I want a gold medal at the next Paralympic Games, swimming after 2 days swimming. And I'm lucky he didn't laugh in my face. He had a little smile, but he didn't laugh. And we started swimming. Him to check my potential, I guess, and me for a gold medal at the next Paralympic Games.
Wow. I think that's a pretty impressive example of setting a goal for yourself. And then, as you say, so that was been 96. And so ahead of the Olympic Games in 2000. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And when we were talking in advance of the call, I was fascinated. You were talking about the active side of you and the disabled side of you. Could you just bring that to life for like how you think about yourself in that particular regard?
I don't think of my disability anymore, I guess. When I was just injured, I had a lot of anger. And the disability was a very big part of my self-recognition. A part of me was disabled. Nowadays, mainly after I had the kids, the living part is so much stronger than the disabled part. The able-bodied part is so much bigger than the disabled bodied part. I think life always wins.
And tell me, so you had you started the journey. You set a goal in 1996, and then I'm sort of we're sort of then 4 years passes to Sydney, and then another 4 years to Athens. You're performing at the very highest level. How did your life change across that period? And maybe the active side or the disabled side, or maybe just in general, how did your life change and develop as you were?
While I was practicing to go to Sydney, I was studying in the university. At the final year, I left the university and put myself into swimming. I swam twice a day, every day, and had gym session 3 times a week. So it's 15 training sessions a week. I was training really hard because an Olympic season is 4-year blocks. So you have to build your ability and then take it down a notch during the winter season, and then start the summer season, work your way up, and then taper it towards the main goal competition of the year. And every year it gets a little harder till you get to the Olympics, and then you take off the load. So we were practicing towards Sydney. And during the Olympic year, I first started with the dislocation of the shoulder. So I had a lot of stress building up on me. But I kept on swimming. You have no other ability other than doing what you have to do to win.
Yeah. And tell me, how did you deal with the sort of setbacks and adversities? Because I imagine in the life of every athlete, there are high points and low points. How did you personally deal with them?
For me, when I had to stop training after the shoulder surgery, I was in a splint for almost a month, so I couldn't swim for a month. I kept coming to the swimming sessions and sit outside on the bench and visualize the entire training session in my mind to keep the neurons working at the same path, so as when I come back, I'll be as sharp as I can and don't have to build it all from the beginning. But real setbacks, when you set yourself for goals, when you set yourself for success, you will fail. And you have to deal with the failing. And my way of dealing with the failures is to time them. When I don't succeed, I'll give you an example. When we went to Athens, the first event I went to was the 100 free, and I got in second by less than a second. And for me, it was a loss because I was aiming for gold. So I allowed myself time to be upset. I said it's okay for me to cry and to mourn and to be angry till tomorrow morning, because I had the day off after the first event and I had to prepare myself for the event again. So I was allowed to be angry, because failure, like success, deserves its respect. You cannot succeed if you bottle up your failures. So this is my way of dealing with it, I guess.
I think that's a very inspiring way of thinking about it. And just to recap, you swam in Sydney in 2000.
Yeah.
And then you went back for more punishment in
Athens 2004. And in Beijing 2008, I went with my first set of twins. They were a year old, and we went to Beijing and I got in fourth, which was very frustrating. So I was training to get to London as well. But at the year before London, I had a hip injury and I couldn't keep on going there. So it was a big loss, because it was supposed to be the end of my career. It was supposed to be my closure.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it. So to find myself a different challenge, I decided I want to cross the English Channel, which is a big physical challenge for anyone, especially for a disabled-bodied person. And I was training for it. And because the water there is so cold, I had to gain a lot of weight. So my coach sent me to practice Pilates for the fat to be equally distributed throughout my body, which is every woman's dream. And I started practicing Pilates. I was in the wheelchair at the time after the shoulder surgery. And after 6 months of training Pilates, I felt that my abdominal wall got a little stronger, strong enough to support me better at the wheelchair, so that I could push the chair by myself some of the way and didn't have to have someone helping me all the time. So I came to my teacher and I told her, we're changing aims. The aim now is not crossing the channel, I want to walk again. It took 3 years of 5 hours training a day for me to start walking again. And today I walk using crutches. I try not to use the wheelchair unless I really, really have to. Being high is much better than being being low.
It strikes me that you've got incredible drive to get things done, both to go to the Olympics, but even that last story even sounds like an equal or maybe even higher level of effort. I'm very much struck by your sort of mental strength and reserves of it. Where does that come from? How do you see yourself? Because clearly there's, to put 5 hours a day over 3 years, that is a lot of time and energy. It's a very impressive feat, but also as obviously, requires an enormous focus.
Yes, but as a Paralympian, I'm used to working in 4-year blocks. To work for 3 years to something is working less than I'm usually working. So it's fine by me. I know how to set my goals far and high. But I don't think I'm special in that way. I think everyone, if you reach low enough, everyone has to use every ounce of strength they have. So the disability pushed me at the beginning. It pushed me to very low points, and it forced me to use the strength I didn't know I have. But I don't think I'm special in that. I think everyone has it. You just have to find your way to use it.
I think that's very nicely said. Thank you. Keren, I wanted to pivot a little bit to the Paralympics themselves. Of course, we're about halfway through them. I've watched more TV in the last month and a half, evening and afternoon and evening sport than I have done in many years, like many other people. Maybe can you talk us a little bit about the Paralympics then and the Paralympics now? How do you see that it's developed? What's the same? What do you see as kind of different? It feels even bigger to me. It feels bigger every single time. But
every single time it looks bigger and it gets more coverage and more attention from people, because people start realizing that being disabled doesn't make you less of a human. Sometimes even more. Sometimes it forces your humanity to grow because your body is so disabled that you have to grow in mind. And the media attention and the coverage causes the games to look bigger and helps people realize the amount of effort a Paralympian puts in to their games is no less and sometimes even more than an Olympian. Because a swimmer is a swimmer. It doesn't matter if you have your feet or legs or hands, or it doesn't really matter. If you swim, you swim.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And in terms of size and scale, does it feel bigger now than it was 20 years ago when you were competing?
Well, I haven't been there at Tokyo this year. It looks roughly the same in size. They have some more events than they used to have 20 years ago. But 20 years ago and now, Paralympic Games are almost the same as Olympic Games. So it's a huge, big, exciting, frightening event that you go to and try your best and wish your best is enough.
Yes, as it was for you on 2 occasions.
Yeah.
I want to pivot again, if that's okay, and talk maybe what has changed though is the reception of disabled athletes, and I think this is something that you've experienced too. I think as a Israeli Paralympian We spoke about this briefly previously, but just the sort of sense of how you're sort of recognized and celebrated. Maybe you could just take us back to then and contrast it with how you feel that would be now.
When the first Paralympic Games I participated in Sydney 2000 in Israel, we had there were riots. There was intifada, and there was fighting and people dying and explosions on the road. And the one ray of light that people had was at the end of night, when the news would say, and then some good news from Sydney, Keren Leibovitch won a gold medal, and the second one and the third one. And then when we came back home for the first time in the history of the Paralympics in Israel, there was a big crowd waiting for me at the airport, and a lot of social media and a lot of governmental attention. And I think one of my biggest achievements, even more than swimming and more than winning, especially in Israel, is raising the awareness for the success of disabled people. Because I think it was the first time people could understand that winning is winning. Again, it doesn't matter if you're able or disabled. You try your best to beat your equals. That's the way it goes.
And do you see any change in the sort of status of disabled athletes?
I can share that in Israel now we have, the games are still going on, and there are 4 gold medalists at the Paralympics. There were 2 gold medalists at the Olympics, and the governmental support that the Paralympian would get nowadays is the same that an Olympian would get. And it's the first time that happened. And the coverage, the TV coverage, is almost the same. There's live coverage from the Paralympics as there were from the Olympics. So that's an achievement I'm really, really proud of.
That is just great to hear. And actually, maybe I could just to sort of take a wider lens. What do you think the Paralympics means to disabled people in general? Do you have a kind of a sort of sense of the message that it carries about? I mean, the intended message of inclusion, etc. And like, what do you think as a sort of
Paralympics is for disabled people, but it means ability, because my injury is referred to as paralysis. Paralysis is not moving. Paralyzed people are supposed to not move. I'm one of the people who move most that I know. I still train 2 to 3 hours a day, every day. So I think Paralympics means ability, actually. It means ability. It means competitiveness. It means setting yourself goals and reaching them. And I guess that's what it means for able-bodied people as well.
Yeah. I like the way that you don't draw a big distinction between able-bodied and disabled. I think that's precisely my feeling about it. I actually think that I just see it on the same level. And I think, and to me, maybe that's what's kind of changed. I think it's interchangeable. You know, arguably there are other sports. I mean, I see, for example, the rise of women's soccer and alongside men's soccer. And actually, it used to be more of a niche thing, and now it's just becoming like much more. And I think that's
realizing people are equal, no matter if you're a man or a woman or white or black or Jew or Arab or able or disabled. No differences whatsoever.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier on that we put the word supermom into your brief intro earlier on, but of course, Olympics and Paralympics and sport isn't the only defining passion in your life. You've also managed to raise a large family, so you obviously keep on setting ambitious goals and hitting them inside and outside of sport.
I have 14-year-old twins. and 12-year-old twins, and they're all boys. So my days are really hectic. A lot of quarreling and shouting and fighting, and children fighting on the floor, and a lot of joy and happiness.
And a
It's
lot of busyness, I would imagine as well.
a lot of business. 4 boys is a handful.
Yeah, no, I think it's well, I think though I think you've lived a very rich and successful life inside and outside of sport, and it's I think it's I can imagine how busy that is, especially obviously during COVID as well, which hopefully we're
Hmm.
starting to sort of move to the end of now. The only other thing I really wanted to turn to is I was really inspired. And by the way, everyone watching this, please go to TEDx and watch Keren's talk there. There's a really fabulous talk. In it, Keren, you talk about something you called the Factory of Hope. And maybe I just wondered maybe whether you could sort of bring to life what your philosophy is there. I've deliberately left this question until the end so people can get to know you a little bit. But I think I think it would be great for folks just to hear how you think and how like how this has sort of maybe been a thread that's run through your life.
After I was injured, as I said, I was in a wheelchair, and I started after the games. I started practicing Pilates, and after 6 months of training, 5 hours a day, I felt my stomach was a little stronger. So I changed the aims from crossing the channel to walking again. During the process of learning, of teaching myself how to walk again without feeling the lower part of my body, I developed a method to use the diaphragm as a supporting muscle more than just a breathing muscle, and taught myself how to engage in a gait using my breathing, how to engage walking using my breathing. And I opened a Pilates studio here in Israel. Most of my clients are able-bodied, but there are roughly 100 people with disability who train with us. We train able-bodied and disabled-bodied together for two purposes. A, it shows the disabled people where they should reach and what they should achieve, because it's a big goal to participate in an able-bodied group. And for the able-bodied, to see a disabled person succeeding in in something they did not succeed in is the best motivation to succeed. So it's a win-win situation for both sides. For me, the process of learning how to walk again took 3 years of roughly 5 hours a day. But we teach disabled people, well, those of, I won't be able to teach anyone how to walk again. You have to have some abilities to be able to do that. You have to have some movement. You have to have something. If you're completely paralyzed, I won't be able to do it. I'll be able to help you sit better in your chair, to help you move a little better, to improve your posture, but I won't be able to make you walk. But I opened my studio 8 years ago, and by today we have 30 people who started with us in wheelchairs for different reasons: Parkinson's, CP, MS, various accidents or head injuries, who all started in a wheelchair and are all walking now. So I think that's an achievement I'm very proud of, because helping to improve someone's quality of life, that's a big achievement. That's the best of achievements.
I imagine I imagine that's exactly the case. I read, or I think it's a UN stat, that I think 80% of people acquire their disability during their life. So
Mm-hmm.
20% are born with their disability and then 80% acquire it. Do you do you see a difference between maybe lifelong disabled people and maybe people like yourself who up until the age of 19 didn't have a disability? Is there a sort of a different outlook, or can you
I
help them differently, or how do you look at that?
helping helping we can help uh, people who were born with disability and people who acquired it throughout life. We can help both. I do see a difference in mindset between people who were born disabled and people who turned disabled as to the degree of coming to terms with your disability. Because someone who was born disabled, well, when a baby is born, they can do nothing, able-bodied or disabled. And a disabled child, like an able-bodied child, learns how to better himself and his abilities to the degree that he controls his body to the best of his ability. So a child born disabled keeps achieving his abilities throughout growing, whereas someone who turns disabled throughout life has reached some most of its potential, and then it gets cut. So I think coming to terms with the disability that happened throughout life is a little harder because it's losing something that you already had.
Mm.
Instead of gaining abilities, you lose your abilities. So it's a big blow to the head.
And we talked about your sort of goal setting and mental strength. You very modestly said that you used to thinking in 4-year cycles. I think to the rest of us not used to thinking in 4-year cycles, it's quite intimidating. But in your work, do you focus as much on the physical side or the mental side,
Yeah.
or do you try, like, how did it, like, maybe you could just bring that to life for us?
When we try to set, for me, when I set a goal, the first thing I do for the goal to come to life is visualize it. As soon as I have a visualization of the goal, of the event happening, I'm sure it's going to happen, because it's kind of like reverse engineering. I reach the goal in my mind, and I just have to reverse my path and find the correct way to do the same thing again. And as I told you at our preparation talk, 2 years ago, for example, I started sapping. Sap is a stand-up paddleboard. You row the sap standing on it using a pedal. I started it when I started it 2 years ago. I would fall roughly 50, 60 times an hour. It would make me laugh and just enjoy it, because falling in the water is much safer than falling outside. I can assure you, and all my broken thumbs and fingers can assure you too. But falling in the water, you don't get injured. So after, like, I guess 6, 7 months of falling 50, 60 times an hour, I started gaining um, some ability to stand on the board and row. And now, 2 years on, I'm rowing for 3 hours every morning. And for my 40th birthday, I intended to cross the English Channel swimming, but instead I started walking. My 50th birthday is going to be in 2 years' time, and the goal I've set is I'm going to cross the channel standing up. And I think standing for me is going to be doing the crossing standing is going to be such a closure, a much bigger closure than doing it swimming. And I guess both mentally and physically, it's a challenge I'm looking forward to.
Well, look, I'm just looking forward to what goal you're going to set for your 55th and your 60th. If standing a paddleboard across the 22 miles of the English Channel is, I mean, maybe, may I suggest the Bering Strait, perhaps, between Alaska and Russia, or maybe the Suez Canal. Keren, it's been wonderful talking to you. We have some questions, so I'm going to ask our wonderful IT folk, our tech folk, to put what we call the Dory up. This is our internal Google questionnaire. So what I will do is I will read the question and then allow you to catch your breath, and then you can answer it. So these are questions from Googlers. So first of all, thank you for asking this question. So Keren, what are your thoughts about the current Paralympics compared to your own experience? We touched on this briefly.
Yeah.
Do you think there is more recognition, support, and appreciation than there was when you competed? Great question. We touched upon it briefly, but is there anything else that you'd like to add?
I think the recognition, the awareness, and the achievements as well are much better now than they were 20 years ago, as it goes for the Olympics as well. And hopefully, I think what happens is the Paralympics becomes something for people to aspire to. So disabled-bodied people have a physical goal, and able-bodied people look at it in awe and understand that you can look up to someone with disability. So yeah, I guess there's a big change in the past 20 years.
Great. I share that view. Thank you all. Another question. This is exciting, so we'll go to the next one. Thank you. How did you adjust your life, Keren, after retiring from competitive sports? What mindset and experiences did you find useful and which were not? So again, we touched upon some of this. I think your goal setting is a very impressive part of your makeup, but maybe, yes, how did you think about adjustments? So you mentioned Beijing, London, and obviously you sort of moved into another phase of your life. So maybe any other reflection?
Well, I think being a competitive athlete is somewhat traumatic, because you work so hard for 4 years to touch the wall after 30 seconds, which will put the focus of the past 4 years and the next 4 years in white or black perspective, because if you succeed, the past 4 years were good, the next 4 years are going to be challenging. If you failed, the last 4 years were not good, the next 4 years are going to be even more challenging. After I finished competing, after I failed reaching London, I couldn't swim. I couldn't go in the water anymore. I had enough. I swam for tens of thousands of kilometers. I had enough. And 2 years ago, I started swimming in the sea. So I swim open waters now. And the change of mindset from swimming lines to swimming open water, from hearing the whistles to hearing the bubbles and the stones and the wind and the currents, is the change from being a competitive athlete to being an athlete. And I think it's a bit more, it's important to move. You have to find how you like moving again after swimming. So I guess that's one of the main changes that happened to me.
Yeah, well said. Very interesting. Davide in Milan, this is another question. So what, Keren, in your experience, is the best way individuals can help in order to help the Paralympic movement grow and grant more opportunities for people with disabilities to practice sport?
If you know a child with disability, push them towards competitive sports, because the Paralympics should be, the games should be based on people who were injured as children or were born like this as the Olympics. Because if you train as a child, then you get your first Olympics at 17 rather than at 27, like I was. You have much more time to be able to win and to be able to practice. So I guess put it to mind to aware disabled people about it, but also keeping yourself aware to the fact that there are disabled people, not just the athletes. There are disabled people and they exist. It's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I've got another one from Milan. Thank you, Lorenzo. Thanks for sharing your experience, Keren. He speaks for me and him and many others. Not all of us can become gold medal winners as you did. Can you share the importance of the journey versus the importance of being the winner?
Wow. When you train, being the winner is the most important thing of all. In retrospective, the way is much more important, because setting a goal, as I said before, setting a goal helps you prepare the way to undergo in reverse and then go it forward again. So I guess aiming helps you be a winner, but in retrospective, the aiming is the most important thing of all. Because if I didn't aim high, I wouldn't know, for example, how to live in 4-year blocks, and I wouldn't know how to teach myself how to walk again. So I guess learning how to achieve is even more important than the achievement itself.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And then I'll ask you to give a brief answer to this last question, because we're just about to wrap up. A question now from Paris. Thank you, Melanie. Keren, did you have any particular role models who inspired you to compete?
I had role models, but not such that inspired me to compete. My mom raised me to be a strong and powerful woman. My mom and my grandma, they brought me up after my parents divorced when I was really young. My mom and my grandma raised me knowing that we are strong, capable women and we can do whatever we set our minds to. So they taught me to only set my mind towards something, and I'm going to make it happen. So I guess they are my role models.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And thank you for sharing your sporting career, your pre, intra and post sporting career, and a little bit about you as a person and what makes you tick. I personally found this I think the way that you set goals and think about your life in both blocks, but also as you reflect back, I've found like you reflect in the moment, but I've also particularly enjoyed as you reflected back.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, you've had a very successful career, and I think being able to share, and in particular getting 30 people back on their feet in some way, shape or form, I think is maybe the greatest achievement of all. So,
I think so too.
Yeah. So Keren, thank you so much on behalf of everybody here at Google for spending time with us today.
Thank you.
And I wish you success and continued luck on your journey. So thank you again. And
thank you.
We'll see you again soon.
Hopefully. Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.
Bye.